I got a question in our Facebook group for recession selling, and this question was from Jorge. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. And Jorge asked, when closing B2B, should you do high ticket closing, meaning Dan Lok, or Jordan Belfort style? So effectively the question is, which one is better for closing B2B sales? And I think we'll expand on that a little bit and just generally look at the two different styles and which would be the better fit for B2B, B2C, and just generally, especially in today's environment. So let's dive in. That is today's topic. If you're new to the channel, my name is Roy Haas. This is the channel, and here we cover everything from B2B, B2C, and also selling in a recession. That's one of our main focuses going forward. Recessionselling.com. Here we talk about the different strategies, the different tips, the different methods that you can use for your services, for your high ticket offers, to be able to move that forward in today's environment with the recession, the depression that we're in. So things are obviously a little bit different now, so you have to approach things a little bit differently. To answer this question, as far as which one would be a better fit for B2B and just generally, so that's something I specialize in. I've been doing this for over 13 years. I've done a ton of B2B sales. I manage sales teams that do B2B sales, and I run companies that do B2B sales. So I want to explain something before we dive in any further. In sales, really the majority of what it takes to close a sale and to do B2B or B2C, doesn't really matter what type of sale, is actually the offer. So if you have a really good offer, then that can compensate for a lot of different things. So imagine if you go into a bar, for example, and you have somebody that's offering you, if you buy one beer, you get two for free. You don't need to be a very good salesman for that. You don't need a very good sales funnel. If I want a beer and you're offering me two for the price of one, that's a great offer. And that'll actually do all the work of these other things. You don't really even need the funnel or the sales and closing. So the offer is critically important, getting your offer right. After that, you have the funnel. That's the process in which the actual offer gets presented. Is the website very nice? You know, if it's a car, for example, how good is the showroom? How good is the marketing to get people to the showroom to look at your high-end cars? And that's going to be your funnel. If it's online, then, you know, how good is your website, the landing page? And then finally, you have what the topic of today is, and what most people will focus on, and really not give enough credit where credit is due, which is these two things which account for most of the sale before it ever gets here. This is a critical step. It's very important because if you don't do this correctly, then these two don't really work in high-tech environments. So, very important step. Now, with sales and closing, you need to do a very good job, otherwise that all sort of crumbles. You know, the whole process crumbles. So it is an important step, but if this isn't right, then this doesn't happen. So I want to make sure that that's understood, that what we're talking about today as far as Jordan Belfort and Dan Lok, they focus on this area, not so much on this, especially Jordan Belfort. He doesn't cover much of this at all, a little bit, touches on it, but not very much. When we look at the different ways that you can do sales, there's, in this particular topic today, Jordan Belfort has the straight line method. The straight line method is effectively you start from A and you get to Z. You have to go in a straight line. If there's any deviation, then you use something called looping to be able to go back to where you were a little bit earlier and then increase confidence. The whole idea with the line is that you increase confidence the whole way along. Now, I didn't do Jordan Belfort's course or attend his seminars. I have his book, and you can see a whole bunch of notes in here. It's a good book. Would recommend reading it. And it's interesting. Obviously, if you've watched the movie Wolf of Wall Street, that was one of the key reasons that I wanted to read this book. I was like, all right, I got to see what this guy actually does. And yeah, it's worth buying. So I definitely recommend that you get a copy. So Jordan Belfort is, he's obviously infamous for what he did, investors, and he screwed them out of a lot of money. But that's not the bit that was of interest to me. I wanted to actually read and see what he was doing in terms of his sales style and see if there's anything that could be picked up there and used, not just for myself, but also for my sales teams. The straight line method is not really anything revolutionary in and of itself. It's basically you go from A, you go to Z or Z, depending on where you are in the world. And the idea is that you have some slight deviation. So if the client or if you start to go a little bit off topic, that's fine, that's acceptable. But you got to stay on that line, that baseline that's always moving forward. So you're always trying to move the sale forward. And if you need to, you can loop back around and then continue moving forward. Always forward, moving the sale along. There's a lot of other intricacies. I really found what was interesting in what Jordan does with tonality. I find that to be quite different than in terms of focus. He really focuses on that quite a bit. And that actually works. So, for example, if I lower my voice a little bit and, I sort of create that power whisper, then you can really sort of, you hone in a little bit. You want to kind of hear what I have to say. And then you raise that back up. And then, so that's a little bit of his sort of style. It's a little bit, it's not something that you would I don't naturally do that. So it does take a little bit of work, but it's definitely a tactic that I have used and I do use once in a while consciously. And even if you do it unconsciously, it just sort of in storytelling, you're going to kind of use that, right? Like, and I kind of approached the door and then I peeked inside and holy crap, I saw, you're going to use that in storytelling a little bit. So it works to keep people interested. So I like his style. Do I think that it's applicable nowadays for B2B? Yes and no. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But first I want to get to Dan, and then I'll sort of bring the two together and compare them side by side. Dan Lok, my experience with Dan Lok is I actually did the Dan Lok, the course, high ticket closing course. So that was, let's see here. This is about a year ago, thereabouts. So it goes in seasons. I was in season 9. And with Dan Lok's, I'm not going to review the course. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk about the methodology. Now, with Dan Lok, here's his book. That's Unlock It, but it's not really the book. The book isn't what I'm going to be covering. It's more the actual methods that he uses, high ticket closing. He really pushes that phrase. He's got quite the YouTube channel now that he's built up over time, and developed quite a following, much bigger than Jordan Belfort on his social media presence, but Jordan Belfort is more well known simply because of the movie. Now, the thing that you kind of want to know with Dan Lok is that he focuses a lot on selling high-ticket products, services, in particular information products. So one of the things that gets that it is useful for is if you have, for example, a coaching service or some kind of a service where you're doing improvement or you're trying to help somebody. In other words, it works very well for high-ticket services where somebody has a pain and you're looking to relieve that pain by offering them this service, which could conceivably do that. And that's one of the core principles that I think is most powerful for Dan Lok's system, high-ticket closing. That said, I have used high-ticket closing in sales. I've used the different techniques in there. But there are certain areas where it's not quite enough and you need to supplement other techniques, other strategies. So how does Dan Lok's system actually work? What is the core of Dan Lok's system? Well, basically what it really boils down to is pain digging. You want to find somebody's pain and you want to do that using questions. You want to control the call using questions and talk much less than the prospects. Now, the way that all that is happening is you're asking certain types of questions and you're digging for pain, amplifying that pain, and the whole thing is questions the whole way along. I'm all for that. However, sometimes it's not enough, especially in a B2B environment. In a B2B environment, you can't just always ask questions. You also sometimes have to present things. You have to do a presentation. There's the actual before you actually get into the actual selling itself, the qualifying, the questions and all of that. There's several different elements in there, and that's where it's not quite enough on its own. The same can be said for Jordan Belfort, but that brings me to one of the core points that I want to point out here. With any kind of sales, like I said before, a lot of it has to do with what you do before the sale. So for example, you can be the best salesperson in the world. If you have a bad offer or a bad service or a bad product, good luck to you. You're going to have a hard time selling it. Yeah, you could sell it, but it's not going to be easy, and probably your closing rate isn't going to be very good. So a lot of the success factor comes from how good your actual company is that you're with, and how well known it is, the social proof, the testimonials. Does the product actually work? Does it have a reputation for working? That'll make anyone's job much easier, even if you're not that good at sales. So that's critically important, and I cannot understate that. That you do want to make sure that those elements are in place, and that's something that I focus on a lot. I've seen night and day differences in performance just by changing the offer. Same sales, same everything, change the offer, boom, just several 100% within a matter of a week in terms of increase in sales, or even just the same day. In fact, by changing the offer, I've closed to the fastest sales that I've ever closed, just by changing the offer, trying out a new offer, bam, this thing works, and it's go time. So what I'm trying to get at is really it's not just enough just to have one type. So I can't say use Jordan's strategy or use Dan Locke's strategy or use Grant Cardone's strategy or use Ty Lopez's strategy or some other strategy. It's not enough just to do one. That's why I have tons of these kinds of books. I have tons and tons of books that I draw from, and then I create my own strategy that I know works, that I test, that my sales teams use, and that's how you come up with a way that works. So what do I actually recommend you do with this? Well, first you want to have enough experience to figure out what works, where you're lacking, and where you need help. What kind of sales you're doing also. If you're doing enterprise sales, a lot of these things will be very different. It's not going to be so much about what you're saying. It's going to be everything before your sale, after your sale, your product, way, way more. So that's really important to bear in mind. But the other side to that is that with some of these techniques, they're all synthesized versions of previous books or previous schools of thought. I'll give an example. So Dan Locke, a lot of you don't know this, but Dan Locke's strategies and his methods are largely, in many ways, not entirely, there's a lot of new things in there, they're derived from this book. So this is David H. Sandler, and you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. So if you read this book and you know Dan Locke's methods, you'll be a bit surprised to see a huge number of similarities. In some cases, a bit too many similarities. So a lot of the best salespeople that I know, and my experience as well, is not from one book or from one way of teaching. And even if you look at Dan Locke, for example, he even says as much. I'm not original. The things that I come up with are not necessarily my own. I synthesize them from many different sources. And that's the way you want to be doing this. You don't want to just use one specific method and that's it. You need to have a repertoire, and then you need to use all of that to create your own soup, your own way, your own strategy that you know works for you and your industry, your product. So that's critically important. So you want to get as much information as you can, and you want to draw from many different sources. It's not enough just to use just one source. Just to have one book that you go from. It's not enough. So to answer the question, ultimately, and before I do that, by the way, I should mention something. If you haven't already done so, subscribe. Get the bell icon if you want to be notified, because there's a lot of other content coming soon. I do respond to questions, as you can clearly see. Make sure you leave a like for the YouTube algorithm. I can't go on in this video unless you leave a like. Just go ahead and leave a like right now, and then I'll continue. I'll wait. All right. Anyway, if you have any questions or anything like that, make sure you leave a comment. And I'll be sure to respond to it, especially if it's within the first few hours. Then I'll get to the comment. I'll be sure to reply. If you want to see something in a future video, let me know. Anyway, now, who do I think would be the best fit for B2B sales? Jordan Belfort or Dan Lok? If I had to choose, it's hard for me to choose just one. I would ideally just say mix and match, do both. But I think that in real world sales, it's kind of hard to say this, but I think that in certain types of sales, I would go with Dan Lok. But for the majority of B2B interactions, I think you'd be better served using more of a Jordan Belfort approach. So for high ticket services, more fancy, let's say if you're trying to sell a self-help type of a journey, or if you're trying to sell an improvement or mentoring or high ticket coaching, something high end that not that many people are going to buy, but those that do are going to pay a lot of money, I would say use Dan Lok. If you're going to be doing something where it's more B2B and let's say you're selling marketing services, then I would actually suggest you go more the Jordan Belfort route. Or some variation of that, maybe with a few Dan Lok elements mixed in if you're going to mix and match. But if I had to choose just one for the bulk of sales utility and sales needs that might come across, and for most jobs that you might have as far as tools in the tool belt, if I had to only pick just one, and I do not suggest doing that, choose many, have many different skill sets, because even Jordan Belfort is not enough for everything, and there are certain situations where it's lacking. But out of those two, I'd say that I would use Jordan Belfort more of the time. And I've not done his course, but just based on the book and what I know works, the things he talks about here, general sales methods, they work, and there are more things in there that you can adapt and use day to day. So that's the review. I hope that was helpful. If you disagree with what I said, then I want to hear about it. Let me know why. If you agree, let me know. I want to hear why you agree. If you think I should review something else, or if there's another opinion that you have that you want to let me know about, leave a comment below and I'd be happy to read about it. If there's a different way or something that I might have missed, let me know about it. And I might even do a follow-up video if you want something specific covered. So that's the review. Jordan Belfort versus Dan Lok. Also, just before I go, don't forget to join Recession Selling on Facebook. I'll leave a link here below. That's Recession Selling on Facebook if you want to know more about how to sell in a recession, what kind of strategies you need. There is a 9-item checklist on recessionselling.com that I will be uploading, and you will actually have available to you. Just you need to leave your email address and your name, and you'll get a free copy. Take a look at the website, find out more, recessionselling.com, and also you have the Facebook group where you can talk to me, interact with me, ask any questions. I'll see you there.